Up next, we have a very special guest from across the pond.
Namaste, my name is Prasiddha Sudhakar. I'm a junior at Rutgers University and the external president of Rutgers Hindu Students Council. This will be a conversation with Rashmi Samant. Rashmi is pursuing a master's at the University of Oxford, studying energy systems, renewables, and climate change. She was the first Indian Hindu female president to be elected to the Oxford Student Union. Over the last month or so, I've had the pleasure of getting to know Rashmi and calling her a genuine friend. Thank you so much for being here with us, Rashmi. It is honestly a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Prasiddha, and for the very kind introduction.
Of course. So, Rashmi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a review of the situation of what happened at Oxford University over the last few months or so?
Well, I'm Rashmi, and I come from a very small coastal town in Karnataka called Udupi. And I was born there, raised there, and that was all of my life. And for my master's, I decided to come to the University of Oxford. And everybody was super excited. And I got here in September last year, and I started my master's. Student advocacy is something very close to my heart because it's something I've done as an undergraduate, and I wanted to continue it here as well. So when the posters went up for student union elections, I thought to myself, why not? I was very skeptical if I'm going to do a DPhil, so I thought it's going to be the last time that I will be a student. So I was like, you know what, give it your best shot. And I thought president this time. So I ran for president, and I ran on issues which I thought were very genuine, and which students really face here. And if we change certain things here, that the life could change a lot here. And it was not based off any philosophy or ideology. It was just basic genuine issues that I saw here on campus. And yeah, I won the election. It was very historic. The margin was historic. The voting or the voter turnout was historic. So the highest number of people ever voted, and I got one of the biggest margins. I was president elect for just 1 week, and I had to resign. There was a sort of a hate campaign that started from hours after I was elected. I started getting threatening messages. It was basically harassment and bullying, all sorts of, anonymous accounts, all sorts of, loose articles coming up here and there. On confession pages, on Twitter using anonymous accounts, and even people started sending me anonymous messages to my Instagram, to my Facebook, to my LinkedIn, to they even started sending me anonymous emails to my university email ID. It got that bad. And it was based on some old social media posts that I had made way back in 2017 when I was barely a teenager. And the words were taken way out of context, and it was sort of twisted in a way to portray me as somebody who hated a bunch of communities, and was generally a demon, and didn't deserve to be the president. And for ensuring this hate campaign, I tried to apologize if people are genuinely hurt by anything or everything I said. And I flew home, and one would expect that this would all stop, but it did not stop, and it took a new turn. It got even more vicious. People started coming after me for my religion, and people started using pictures of my family to sort of paint me as a bigot and a very hateful person. And within moments, these allegations were all across social media, and everybody was just picking it up and saying horrible things about me.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So to kind of dig a little bit deeper into, your Hindu identity, how did you come about the Hindu identity, and what was it like growing up as a Hindu?
Well, I think my first introduction to Hinduism was being born in a Hindu family. So that was literally the first introduction. I come from a very, traditional family where we celebrate all the festivals together. Everybody gets together, and the food. It's so I think the initial few days, for the younger self in me saw more of the cultural aspect of Hinduism, and it was something to look forward to, these holidays and these celebrations, sort of looking forward to meet all the cousins and sort of embrace the traditions. So it used to be that time of the year when all the worries sort of vanished and you just had fun. So that was the initial sort of introduction to Hinduism for me. But then it later on it evolved into a source of spirituality, resilience through difficult times, and a sort of a guiding path when everything sort of started to feel like that nothing's going anywhere, and you're terribly discouraged and you don't know where your life is going. So it's sort of started into metamorph into a sort of a guiding light. So I think I've had like my journey with Hinduism.
There's kind of this in-between gap that you're stuck in, which is what we call desi. And a lot of people don't really step outside of that desi box. It's more so that, oh, I'm a desi because I'm in this middle, but they don't really feel proud of their Indian identity, but they don't feel proud of the American one either. So it's always this kind of like confused middle ground. And it's really hard to then be like, oh, I'm a desi, but I'm also a proud Hindu, So yeah, that's completely relatable. So what kind of patterns did you notice happening when this campaign, this hate-filled campaign, especially attacking your identity, what exactly were the patterns in terms of like the Hinduphobia aspect?
Well, most of this entire incident was very confusing, and it was a lot to take in. It was overwhelming, and it's something I've like encountered for the very first time. But there was one specific pattern that emerged that was very apparent for me. It was that people found it, people just accepted all these terrible allegations against me without proof or debate. For instance, a person within the faculty at the university wrote that she's Islamophobic because she was born and raised in coastal Karnataka. Well, a regular human being can see no logic in that. Just because you come from a specific geographic region, that doesn't mean that you hate an entire community or religion. But people just accepted that, and people believed it and still continue to believe that I'm Islamophobic. And all the other allegations which were leveled against me, all of that was very easily accepted. There was no debate, there was no demand for proof. That hang on for a second, what's the exact reason, or why are you exactly calling her all of these things, and why are you exactly calling her names, and why are you exactly telling all these things, or why are you outrightly harassing her and making confident statements about her character without proof, deliberation, or anything, because it's a person's life that you are known by the reputation that you hold, and the sort of character that you're meant to hold. And fingers were pointed at me from various directions, and people just very quickly accepted it for what it could be. And I just felt like there is so much misinformation about Hindus and Hinduism, that the moment somebody makes an allegation, it is very easy for the wider community to accept it, because we are perceived as somebody who are capable of all these things, who are capable of being Islamophobic or something like that. It's already, there's so much misinformation that we hate people, and we are despicable and all of that. And when these allegations come up, then without much proof or deliberation or anything, it's accepted. It is in fact not just accepted but propagated. It's written in a way that that they completely accept it, and that there was something wrong, and then they tell it to 100 people, and it just keeps growing, like the misinformation, it just keeps spreading, and it's just so quick. Like it's like instantaneous combustion. Like it just happens, and there is no that, hold on a second, let's like take a back step and just see whether it makes sense. This you're not given the benefit of doubt. People just assume the worst in you, because all these stereotypes are already existing about who you are and what you're capable of. So I feel like that was one pattern that I very specifically noticed.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, so one of the claims made about you was a photograph from your parents' Facebook. Can you talk a little bit about that, and what was most problematic about it, and we can discuss.
Well, I it's absolutely, ridiculous that I'm still talking about it, and that poster is still up on the internet, by a faculty member at this university. And basically a picture of my parents were pulled up from my mom's Facebook profile, and it's a very old picture. It's not even like up on the timeline or something. So deliberate efforts were made to stalk her, and a picture was downloaded, and it's just the two of them smiling in traditional clothes. And there's a small photo frame which says Jai Shri Ram. So basically they are expressing their religion, just in a very happy and in a very nice way, and there is no caption whatsoever to that picture. And that picture was taken, and their faces were blackened, and an essay was written about them, that that they support destruction of mosques, and that they're absolutely despicable, and they're Islamophobic, and that makes me a Sanatani person, and a Hindu person who hates Muslims, and who is a bigot, and all of that. And so many allegations were leveled against me, and just because my parents chose to express their religion in a very celebratory manner, it was just taken so out of context. And people still believe all the allegations which were based, which were made on that picture. And it is so terrible, because I'm the only child, and I don't know, in India, you have this special sort of responsibility that you feel towards your parents and their respect. I just feel like, just because I decided to run for president and won the election, that they were just dragged in the, in the mud, and they're, so many terrible things were told about them and their beliefs, and that I can still do nothing about it, and that it's still up there, and people are still talking about it, and still sort of using that as a means to say hateful things about them. And it has definitely been one of the lowest points of this entire controversy, that a religion was used to target me, and my religion was used, my way of upbringing, my parents, and their beliefs were just used to target and tarnish my sort of character, and that it was just used to say that we are absolutely terrible people. How do you make that conclusion? I mean, how? It's absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think the biggest part of this whole thing is it's more so like if people were offended by what you had said and you offered to apologize and have a conversation about it, especially because these were social media posts from when you were a teenager. A lot of people, I'm sure including myself, have said things as a teenager that when we look back, we think, oh, this is just silly or ridiculous. But the fact is that people are trying to use that against you and then say that you were saying all of these like horrible things because of that Hindu identity is what's most disturbing. They try to attribute all of those things back to your religious identity. Can you give a few more examples actually of how people used your Hindu identity against you? Because from the way it seems like to someone like me from the outside who's looking in, people took offense at those posts, but then instead of really addressing what those posts were, they instead just attacked you for your identity. So can you talk a little bit more about other examples that of Hinduphobia that you have been facing?
Well, generally it's just cyberbullying, cyber attacks, and all of that. And I mean, I haven't been back in the UK for far too long now. It's just been, I think, day two since I've been back to experience anything more. uh, and they all so most of it has been anonymous and through internet, and all of that. And there have also been societies coming out and making public statements about me, so this has also been an aspect of that. And it was made in a way that that it was picked up by media houses in no time, and it was used to call me fake and all of that. My concerns were completely sort of whitewashed. I think this was another sort of attack that I faced from, students within the community. Nobody reached out to me and asked, hey, like, what happened? Can you like tell your side of things? they just jump to conclusions based on posts, hateful posts made by other people on social media, and decided to write lengthy statements about it to further, add to further try and add legitimacy to, claims which were ripping my character apart. And that, I feel like, it's so crazy, because these are legitimate, these are organizations, and these are people who actually are, real people. It's not even these anonymous cyberbullying accounts that people run on the background. At some degree, you sort of sideline these anonymous attacks. I mean, it does affect you, but at one point you're like, these people don't have anything better to do with with their lives. But then, when these anonymous posts become basis for, real statements coming from, uh, people with like names, they're just using their name to sort of add legitimacy to this, just based on some anonymous posts and hateful posts. It just feels too real. Nobody is, willing to even address the fact that, hey, there's a human at the center of this. Let's talk, let's reach out, let's find out what's going on. No. And they know where to find me if they want to send hateful messages, but apparently they seem to forget where to find me, or where to reach out to me if they want to, really find out, really care about what happened. And if they really cared about the issue, I feel like they would have done that. But it's all about, pushing hate, unrest, and just trying to make me feel terrible by the end of the day.
So how would you say has been the response from the wider Hindu community, and what have you kind of like come to understand about it?
Well, I think there are two ways to answer this. The Hindus in India have been standing in solidarity, without bias, and they've been standing so supportively, so strongly behind me. And it's been really wonderful to have them all, have my back. The wider, British Hindu community and the American Hindu community has also been super supportive, and like you, and they've all reached out and been generally very, very nice. But there have been smaller groups which within the Hindu community who have been criticizing me, who have been one of the biggest detractors of, what happened. And again, they've never reached out, never, ever, they've completely ignored the fact that there is still a post up there. I mean, at this point, I'm not even, it's not even me making it up. You can very well go to the person's, profile. I mean, the links are all up. You can just Google it and you can find the post where terrible things are told about me. And it can be very well, used to jump to a conclusion that, it doesn't have any basis. But the Hindu organizations completely refuse to, acknowledge this aspect of it, and go on and sort of, write hateful things about me. So there has been two-way thing, but I think for majority of the fact, they've all been very supportive and they've been standing very strong.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, how would you say is the campus environment in general? I could probably also answer this from a Rutgers perspective, but how do you feel like the campus environment is in general towards Hinduism and Hindu people? Have you, even before this incident, did you feel that it's been friendly or particularly like unfriendly?
Well, I think my Hindu identity really did not come into play until this incident happened, because I never thought that my Hindu identity would be targeted in such a way. Because I feel like until it happened to me, I thought it was very much, not really possible for somebody to just come and attack you for your identity, like out of the blue. And I never thought it would be possible, or it's, so I never thought it's there, or, but ever since this incident, there seems to be a very hostile environment towards, a specific, like towards Hindus. And, even this Rutgers incident that I've been very keenly following, it's just terrible to see how things are playing out, and how much, we are all suffering. And now I can totally relate to what I think fellow students go through, because I've been through it myself. And I mean, in solidarity with all the Hindus at Rutgers. I think it's the least I can say. It's the least I can say. And it's sort of an attack on, I think, a person's self-respect, because a religion is such an important part of your identity that an attack on that is like an attack on a person's self-respect, self-confidence, and sort of how you conduct yourself. It takes a direct hit on that. It's just very real for those still in denial.
Yeah, one part of it is that there are a lot of people who still go out there and say that Hinduphobia doesn't exist. And this is all just Hindu nationalism and it's a way to silence critics. But here's the way that I see it. You can criticize any political party, any political ideology all you want. But the minute you really try to say that all Hindus are a certain way and all Hindus, are responsible for XYZ actions of any political party or movement or whatever it is, that's when it becomes Hinduphobia. No one is saying you can't criticize, politics, because that's just life. But we are saying that, you can't really use politics as a guise for Hinduphobia. You can't use politics as a guide to say that all Hindu people are XYZ or in a certain way. So no, I totally understand what you're saying. So how would you say this has helped you, though, connect with other Generation Z Hindus from around the world, like not just in America, but even in India itself? Like, how do you feel like, even though obviously this incident is absolutely terrible, but what I do say to people like quite often, especially when talking about the Rutgers case, is yes, this is absolutely awful that it's happening, but at the same time, think of how many people are actually connected because of this. Like, would we be having this conversation right now if this Rutgers or this Oxford incident didn't happen? All the kind of friendships that we have made with other people who are like-minded, who have faced similar kinds of discrimination. So how would you say this has helped, the Gen Z community of Hindus connect especially?
I definitely feel that we've all come together. These incidents, especially the past few months, I think Oxford happened and then the Rutgers incident came out, and it just happened one after the other. And this has sort of, brought the wider Hindu community together as well, not just the Gen Z. And I think it has also shown me what kind of community we are, that, even despite so many things happening to us, like one would expect that after being through so much and getting so much hate through certain kind of people and certain organization, that I would end up hating them. But somehow I haven't. All I want to do is just keep telling my story in the best way and in the most civilized way that I can, and hope and pray that one day they will realize that that this was wrong. And I see the same thing within our community, within the Gen Z Hindus, and within the wider community. And I think it is something wonderful that we all share, and to sort of know that that's where we are at, and that that's what our religion has taught us, and that's the way we are lobbying for ourselves, for our rights, and trying to have ourselves heard. And that has been a very wonderful part about this whole experience, that it has not sort of radicalized us in any way, but if not anything, it has made us stronger in our beliefs, and maybe even more compassionate. At this point, I feel like I am more compassionate to stories of other people suffering harassment, and to stories of other sort of things happening around the world. If not anything, it's only made me more compassionate, more like inclusive. I really feel more about sufferings of other communities, more so now than ever. And I think I see the same thing within our entire community. I see it in you, I see it in the others that I've met through this incident, and I see it within the broader community too. And that is something wonderful that I think is very exclusive to us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like just kind of like going off a little bit on that. How do you feel like if you didn't experience this entire incident or the Hinduphobia that you faced, do you think you would have reacted differently to when the Rutgers case did come up? And if so, how do you feel like you would have reacted differently?
I think the underlying feelings would have been the same. I would have definitely felt terrible about everything that's happening at Rutgers, and I would be in solidarity with the students, but I don't think I would be as vocal, vocalizing my thing just out of fear of judgment from others. But this incident has sort of showed me that judgment from others don't matter. What you think of yourself by the end of the day is what matters. And for as long as you can, you should raise your voice for others who are going through something, even if you haven't gone through it yourself. And this has been one sort of an eye opener that I've had about shared experiences and advocacy, and how much each voice counts, because we do have a lot of supporters, but most of them are silent. And they do really feel bad about what's happening to us, but they're very silent. And by the end of the day, when it comes to actual accountable results that we can have as a community for ourselves, that we can achieve, what counts is the voices who are talking and who are actively advocating. I think it has made me very vocal and very active in sort in speaking out for things I really care about. And it is something that I'm absolutely, proud of having discovered within myself. And yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I'm so proud of how vocal you've been and how much dignity you've maintained throughout this entire thing. But why do you think other Hindus are not perhaps as vocal as you are? What exactly is preventing them from speaking out?
Well, I can't speak for everybody. So, I don't want to generalize what others, might feel why they don't talk. But I think for me, it was basically the fear of judgment and exclusion from the, circles that I'm in. That people would just judge me and be like, oh, you are that typical Hindutvavadi, this and that, and the sort of tags that get attached to you the moment you start speaking and advocating for a specific religion. And I think that is one fear that I had initially. And that that people will judge me, and people will say a lot of things. But maybe it's something that others have, the fear of exclusion from others, and sort of discrimination from others.
So I think with that in mind, there is still this element of confusion, especially with Indian Americans and Hindu Americans in particular, that you don't really come out and say, I'm a Hindu American. You are stuck in that middle ground of identity, and you don't really proudly identify as one. Honestly, maybe I've lived here for the last 2 years, but I do notice that more and more people are only coming out very recently now and saying, I'm proud to be a Hindu American. But you wouldn't really see that like happen before, mostly because there are so many different identities in terms of like your nationality or your ethnicity, that you try to focus more on that, but being the Hindu is not necessarily the predominant one. So I think this hinders people in terms of speaking out, because they're not really sure what to speak out for, because there are all these different identities. You're in a melting pot of cultures, especially in a place like Rutgers, which is so diverse, ironically, and this has happened. So I think people are generally a little, obviously don't want to make generalizations like that, but people are generally a little bit more confused about the entire identity aspect. And like you said, when you're not particularly educated about a specific subject, it becomes really, really difficult to speak out about it. So like perhaps for me, and you can also talk a little bit about your upbringing, but I learned a lot about Indian history and Hindu history, the colonization of our people ever since I was very young. And kind of having that background of being talked to about these subjects from a very young age. And when you'd speak to your other friends who are Hindu, but they didn't necessarily have that kind of background, maybe their parents just said, you should do shlokas, you should do pujas, go to the temple and pray, but never necessarily, got into the meaning of like, why are we praying like this? What does this mean? What is the significance of this whole thing? That they don't necessarily understand it. And because they don't understand it, they don't really appreciate it. But for people who do understand and have learned to appreciate it and have read about our history, then they do become more vocal because they understand like what have our people been through. So kind of like, I guess, giving that question to you as well, like what do you feel like was different in your upbringing that did make you a little bit more vocal, or was it more so just this incident in particular?
Well, for me, it's just been all my life. And it's been such a positive experience for me. And I think by the end of the day, something which has been so positive for me in my entire life, which has encouraged me so much to do so many things and, achieve so many things. I think by the end of the day, I just did not want anybody to have misconceptions about such a beautiful practice. For me, it was more of that. That my entire upbringing was so beautiful. I've had a great time, and anything and everything I've achieved after that, during difficult times, during I've just found that mental balance from being a practicing Hindu. And now to have people raise questions about this very way of life, I feel is very unfair, because it has given me so much. And it is since it's given me so much, it's only right that I correct the narrative about it and not let anybody just get away with saying anything about it, because it is your responsibility to sort of give back when you've been benefited so much by something. So I think it was more of that.
No, thank you for that. I think it is very different for someone who did grow up in India versus someone like me who did grow up in multiple different countries, but of course, like, has come to the US in particular. So I think the differences in India, you're kind of, the Hindu aspect is so ingrained into your identity. And I don't feel like this is just for Hindus, but just even for other religions that live in India, it's more so that you don't really need to be overt about your identity, because you feel like, yes, I'm an Indian, and being a Hindu is like part of it, and everything is so ingrained into the way of life that you live in India. So, like, for example, when I basically spent every summer in India since like growing up, and it is so normal to like draw the kolam in front of your house in the morning. Like, this is like a small thing, but it's just, it becomes such a normal part of your life that you don't, like, when you decide to go into the West, you don't need to necessarily be overt about it, because when you're in India, this is like ingrained into your way of life, your practice, your identity, going to the temple and like giving to animals, all of these things. It's just, it's there. Like, you don't need to necessarily feel like you need to explain these things to other people who may not like understand it. But for when you are coming into the West, you don't see these things. It's not really normal to have all of these experiences and do all of the same things that you do when you're in India. So I've noticed that whenever Hindus especially go out into the abroad, that they don't really are overt on their identity. So it's more so that, like, yes, I'm a Hindu and I practice Hinduism, but it's more so just something that they kind of keep for themselves, and they're not really they don't go out there and get involved in other things that ensure that Hinduism is protected. But we are starting to see a shift in diaspora ever since both the Oxford and the Rutgers case came out. Thankfully for us over here, like, we didn't get harassed in the way that you did. We're like very sorry, but a lot of us, obviously stand in solidarity with you through what you've been through, and it is so wonderful to connect with someone like you. So for our last question, just to wrap up, what are some of your next steps from here? What are your future plans, and how do you plan on, continuing your advocacy?
Well, I definitely have to finish my degree, and I'm back in Oxford for that. So I'm going to finish my degree in person, and this advocacy is something I'm not going to stop. And for as long as I can, I'm definitely going to push forward for better measures in place to protect Hindu students, so that what happened with me does not happen to another Rashmi in Oxford, or for that matter, any campus here. Just because you're a Hindu or something, that you don't have to be so deviously targeted. So I think the one goal that I have is that there should be not another incident like the one that happened with Rashmi Samant. So
Absolutely. And, I'm so glad that you're doing that, because, of course, this should never happen to anyone ever again. And also just to show that there is a wider Hindu community that is out there for the support of Hindu students like yourself, like myself, even though obviously the contexts are different. But, we do certainly need to work to make a very strong Hindu community that backs each other and make sure that none of this happens to their own people. So with that, we will wrap up this discussion. Thank you so much for being with us, Rashmi. It is an honor, it's a delight, and I'm so proud to call you my friend, and for all the amazing work that you've been doing and your resilience throughout this entire thing. It is so, commendable. And I look forward to seeing all the amazing things that you achieve from this point onwards.
Likewise, Prasiddha, it was such an honor to be here and to have a platform to, tell my story and, to share what the ins and outs of what happens. I hope we can, bring in some measurable changes with this and encourage more Gen Z Hindus to be vocal and join the wider cause.
Of course. So thank you, Rashmi, and namaste, everyone.
I just want to say thank you to our special friend Rashmi for joining us today and sharing her difficult story.
For the latest on our YouTube channel, click subscribe and hit the bell icon for alerts on new content. Remember to like, comment, and share our videos. For more about HSC, you can visit the social media handles listed below.